Today on No Rules Reviews, I'm going to be talking about Harvest. Harvest is a worker placement game designed by Trey Chambers and published by Tasty Minstrel Games. It plays 2 to 4 players and has an advertised playtime of 30 to 60 minutes. As you can see, there are a ton of pieces here in this tiny little box, which are going to give me loads to talk about. So let's dive right in. So these are just some of the components you get in the box. And as I said before, there's a ton of stuff in here that gives you a really, deep game in a small box. I'm going to talk a bit about where that depth comes from. Before I get there, I just want to look at kind of some of the ways they managed to sneak more in. They've used double-sided cards over here for the buildings as well as the fields, which means they've kind of got multi-use stuff going on there. They've used thinner cardstock on the player boards and the extensions, which again, you could say is a con, but I think it lets them fit more in. And just on top of this, one of the other things I'm going to be talking about is all the different characters they've shoved in here as well. So there's absolutely a ton of stuff in here. The first thing I actually kind of want to talk about is how Harvest is different to other worker placement games. And that kind of comes down to 2 things. First of all, over here, you can see there are only 2 workers per player, and there's no way to expand that. So you're going to have 10 worker placements through the whole game. That doesn't sound like much. And it isn't, but that's what keeps the game playtime low. And you might be sitting there going, well, how can I get anything done with 10 placements? And the answer is over here with the drafting mechanism for turn order, which is really clever. And actually these changing actions every turn. And all of these things together combine to allow you to get a lot done in a small amount of time. Another thing I really want to talk about is kind of the thematic tie-ins. So for me with theme, there are 2 things I'm kind of looking for. And the first is, do the thematic tie-ins of the rules make them easy to remember? Of which the answer is yes. You need fertilizers when you're planting crops, you need water when you're looking after your crops, and that stuff means it's a little bit easier when you're thinking, what did planting do, what did tending do, what do I need for these things? The other kind of thing is how well does the game invoke the theme? How much of a farmer do I feel like in this game? And actually what really makes it work here are the components. If these were just brown cubes, red cubes, blue cubes, little meeples, it wouldn't feel quite as thematic. But for me, someone who really likes the farming theme, this does invoke it quite well. The thing I did mention those buildings a little bit ago, and they're kind of there's a huge range of buildings, and something that's really nice about them actually, that you get buildings which kind of focus on endgame points, and buildings which focus on abilities, and your buildings with abilities can combo off each other, and that's really satisfying, especially if that stacks with your own player power. So those are a really, really nice way, and they introduce a lot of variability into the game because you're going to see different ones of those every single game. You're going to see different special actions every game, different drafting actions every game, different characters every game, and all this stuff means I could play the game 5 times in a row, and it would feel totally different every single time. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the economy of the game. But before I can really get there, I want to talk about your last turn. So your ideal last turn really would be to have spent 4 turns gathering fertilizer, gathering seeds, gathering water, and then use a single plant tend action to do a ton of stuff on the last turn. Because plant and tend allow you to do as many things as you want with a single action. So obviously you don't want to be taking that action through the game over and over. However, the game forces you to say, actually I've got to plant some stuff and I've got to harvest it before I can do this other cool stuff. Because I can only spend my gold stars. I can't spend the silver stars I have on the seeds, obviously the exception being the snap peas. And that's a really simple idea, but that means you can't just do a gathering up for a big mega turn. Yes, many players may on the last turn just want to do a big plant or a big tend, but you will have to have done some planting and some tending before then to get there, right? Because the core actions don't generally have costs, a few of them do, but the special actions, some of the really strong ones, have costs of 2 or even 3 gold stars. And if you haven't been harvesting, you're not going to be able to afford those stronger actions. So it's a really simple idea, but I think it works really, really well. And it really forces the players to kind of make that decision of, do I want the efficiency of doing fewer plant tends, or do I want the flexibility of having that action? So as I alluded to earlier, there are 9 different special characters here which give you a ton of variability game on game. There's actually 10 if you include Whale Plantsomdill, but I've never played with him. I think the thing about this game that makes it interesting to me are these different powers. So every single character comes with 2 powers, their own set of starting resources, and their own terrible pun. And as someone who works in education, I can really appreciate that. Teenagers I work with don't appreciate the puns as much, sadly. Before I can really get into talking about the characters, though, I want to talk about the asymmetry and what I consider good asymmetry. So to me, good asymmetry is something which gives you more decisions to make. Right? I'm playing these types of games to make interesting decisions. If I'm not getting to make interesting decisions, I may as well just be playing Snakes and Ladder. And overall, I think the characters do give you that. They give you some kind of guidance, but they don't shoehorn you. You know, Gus Arborfall, he's doubling his points from buildings, so you're going to want to focus on the buildings which score you points rather than those which give you abilities. Princess P. Madonna gets her discount on planting, so maybe you're going to want to plant Scarrets for free, but the reduction kind of just helps you with everything, and decide, oh, do I want to plant Scarrets or Ghost Peppers in my greenhouse? It's great. You get things to think about. Bomard is the complete opposite of this, and I want to get on the record right now, he's the only character that I have a problem with. 8 of these 9 characters I think are fantastic, but Bomard is not. And the reason that is pretty much exactly what I just said earlier. Bomard does not give me options. Bomard tells me, you're going to plant snap peas, and damn it, you're going to do it well. And that's it. I'm not going to do anything else, really, when I'm playing Bomard. I'm just going to spend a couple of turns getting set up, and then for the rest of my turns, I'm going to tend and harvest. I'm going to tend and harvest. I'm going to tend and harvest. It's not interesting to play as, and it's not interesting to lose to because you can't stop him. It's just not good asymmetry. But apart from this one character, they are great. It makes every game different, and even if you ditch Bomard, there are still 8 special characters left. It means you can deal everyone 2, have them pick one. They can even pick Will if they're a boring person. But I think it's really great, except for this kind of one gigantic flaw with the characters. So let's talk about the actual worker placement. First of all, in some sense, Harvest can be quite forgiving. These core spaces are unblockable, so if I really need to tend, I'm going to be able to do it. Obviously, I'm not going to feel good doing it. There's a spot where you get to do 2 of these things, but if you really, really have to do tend, you cannot be blocked from it. So it is a little bit forgiving there. But one criticism which you could say here is that some spots are obviously better than others. Right? That's a criticism that many older worker placement games got. But to me, I think this is a conscious design decision here, and I think it works. Right? There are one of these special spots per player, and make no mistake, they are much better than the core ones, but that's really where the game is. And that's kind of the point. When you're drafting for your turn order, you're also considering, well, how badly do other people want these spaces? The other reason why I think this works is that, unlike something like Stone Age, where everyone's going to want to increase the size of their tribe or increase their agriculture, different people are going to want to do different things depending on their characters, depending on their plans, basically. So it's not this space is the best space and the first player is going to get it. It's which space is best for me. One thing I do want to point out here is that in a 2-player game, I think you lose some of the interest here, because you're only going to get to see 2 of these special actions per round. And you're only really going to make a very simple decision when you're picking your turn order, which is, I'm going to take the best thing which lets me go before you, or I'm going to take the best thing which lets me go after you. So while I think this is really, really interesting, really great, there is a slight issue here with 2 players. So those are the bulk of my thoughts on Harvest. There are a few other things maybe I should talk about. The crops in general are really easy to tell apart, but the Scarrets and the Ghost Peppers look a little similar in terms of colour and size, and I've had games where people haven't realised they were 2 different crops until maybe halfway through, and I think a little player aid could have really helped that. Another possible issue is that the rules are a single sheet, and maybe you think, oh, that's great, it's really easy to learn, but you're not going to find any clarification there. So if there's any kind of ambiguous wording on the buildings, you're going to be going on to Board Game Geek to have a look. But let's talk about the pros. As I think I've made it clear, I think this game is really, really great. And one pro I haven't really mentioned yet is that the turn order changing every single round makes it much more interesting to me than a standard worker placement. You aren't having the situation of first player going clockwise, fourth player sitting there going, well, this is a bit lame, I guess I'll take first player. And you don't have the actions to do that as well because there's only 2 per player. And this turn order draft is a really great take on that. And again, I just want to kind of emphasize how much stuff you get in this little box. Here's Harvest. Here's Splendor, which obviously is often criticised for the lack of stuff fitting in the box. Harvest, on the other hand, stuffed full. Huge game in tiny little box. If space is a concern for you, it's got to be one you've got to at least think about checking out. If you have checked it out and you did like it, how can we talk about Harvest without talking about Agricola? And in some ways, Harvest does feel like a tiny epic Agricola. It's got a similar farming theme, worker placement. Doesn't have obviously the stress and the feeding, but if you played Harvest and enjoyed it, you need to check out Agricola. If, however, it's not the farming and the worker placement that gets to you, but it's the turn order mechanism, it's Havana you have to check out. Havana is a game which has such a lovely turn order mechanic, and if I were ever going to make a game, I would steal that mechanic in a heartbeat. I love Havana's turn order mechanism, so that's one I would check out if you think that's at all interesting. And obviously Viticulture is the other game which is similar to this. You've got drafting for turn order, you've got planting wine grapes versus the farming, and you have forgiving worker placement spots. So those are 3 games to check out if you've enjoyed Harvest. But overall, it was definitely my surprise winner of Essen 2017.